I'm Brad Smith, and I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, working at the School of Art and Design at the University of Michigan. My art for many years now has been really at the intersection of biology, life sciences, technology, and the visual arts. So the art that I do today, it is reinterpretations of visual data that is typically biological in nature, where I'm asking questions about the meaning of those biological images. Specifically, I have taken biomedical imaging data from my research that I've done when I was in the Department of Radiology, and it's usually magnetic resonance images of embryos, most of them mouse embryos that have been transgenically modified, where researchers wanted to know what the effect of changing the genes was. And some of the embryos I've imaged were human embryos from a collection at the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Washington, D.C. So I take that data and I put it in a computer and I manipulate those images of embryos and do electronic cuts of the embryos. In a way, it's like doing a virtual fold-out paper doll cut, where you fold the paper up, you cut it with scissors, and as you unfold the paper, you get a very unusual pattern. I do something very similar on the computer with the images of these mouse or human embryos, where electronically that data is cut and unfolded in a way that you get highly unusual and very elongated images and pictures or representations of these embryos. When they're cut vertically and extended, they start to look like totems, and I reinterpret it or present it in ways that takes it out of the scientific realm and puts it more into a social realm, or even at times extremely far from there into a decorative realm. And I represent it in a way that it becomes more pattern, color, texture, and is not recognized anymore as specifically coming, say, from human embryos. And then on top of that, these images raise lots of social questions that are intellectually and are provocative and intellectually interesting in addition to their visual appeal. When people learn that these are human embryos, for example, all kinds of questions are raised about where did you get these embryos, and how were they obtained, why did you get them, and is it appropriate to use these images of human embryos in this kind of a way? As part of this project, I was asked to create a website that would show all of these cross-sectional images based on magnetic resonance imaging, and to create animations that showed sort of fly-throughs and rotational embryos so that people could understand the embryos by looking at them. What surprised me is that when I created this website, I started getting lots and lots of email. The email was not so much from clinicians or scientists or people studying developmental biology as I thought it would be, but rather it was from people who were complete strangers but who saw these images and started to ask very interesting and poignant questions. I got emails saying things like, I am a 16-year-old girl. My boyfriend tells me that now that I'm pregnant, I should get an abortion. I went to your website and I'm looking at these embryos and I need to know, is my embryo a human yet? Has the soul entered the embryo yet? Sometimes I get emails saying, I see that you use these human embryos. I would like to sell my embryo to you. How would I go about doing that? Or other people looking at these images and saying, oh, when does it become a person? When does it have a gender? When does it become male or female? And so many of these questions that they're raising as a result of looking at these, what I thought were clinical images, many of these questions have to do with sort of personal identity. When do we become human? When do we have moral obligations towards these things that we're looking at? And so it struck me suddenly that these pictures I was creating had a lot of social implication and political implication well beyond the clinical or scientific. And so I started to take these images and say, well, what if I push that further and move them into the realm of art, and started to manipulate these images even further? Could I perhaps address those in different ways, those same kinds of questions, as in terms of, is it still a human once you start to manipulate this human embryo and make it look like a totem, or make it look like something quite different and foreign? These images started to convey messages of, what does it mean to be human? When do we become human? When do we move from just pure biology to something that has political importance or social status or legal status, or perhaps more importantly, moral and ethical obligations? Trying to evoke questions and having people sort of ask and consider things that they have not thought about before is what I'm trying to achieve with my art.